If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, and walk across the water, the water. You feel defeated, falling on your knees and looking out for some hope tonight. You try to stand up, but you throw your hands up like you no longer have the strength to fight. Cause you've seen too many sunsets, too many days ending in the darkest night. But on your own, you'll never know, you'll never know. If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water, the water. Believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water. If you believe. They say that all you need is faith, but it's almost like you lost your way. Took a few wrong turns, took a few breaks, falling behind now, looking for grace. Cause you need someone to lift you up, yeah, make right all the things you've done. Cause on your own, you'll never know, you'll never know. If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water, the water. Believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water. If you believe, yeah, you can do anything, you can do anything, you can do anything. If you believe.
Buenas,
No, it's not
one,
easy.
ya
one
vamos.
question. Can you see the subtitles that are over there in the Zoom meeting or not?
Sí, ya vamos a comenzar. Buenas tardes, buenas noches, desde donde nos estén viendo. El día de hoy tenemos una entrevista de una persona que ha venido apoyando tanto la fundación y además personas con enfermedad de Pompe. Ella se llama Heather, mayormente conocida como la líder de Pompe Alliance. Hola Fernando, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, buenas tardes, buenas noches, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos a este espacio. Como nos decía Brian, estamos con una super invitada. Ella es Heather Shorten, ella es la directora ejecutiva de Pompe Alliance. Es socióloga, tiene una licenciatura en sociología, tiene también una maestría en trabajo social y pues ha sido una gran defensora de los derechos de las personas con Pompe. Pues viene trabajando esto desde hace bastantes años y con la Fundación Pompe Club Internacional. Llevamos trabajando con Heather desde el 2020. Ella pues habla inglés, entonces hoy estamos acá desde Zoom. Tenemos subtítulos en inglés, bueno, en español, perdón, para las personas que de pronto no logren entendernos o bueno, a ella, a nosotros sí, no logren entenderlas. Bueno, ahí vamos a tener ayudita extra de Mariela, que acá está Mariela, amiga también de la casa, Mariela de Rarus Health, que nos va también a apoyar en esta entrevista, y también a Gabriela de la Universidad del Bosque, nuestra voluntaria que también está con nosotros. Muchas gracias a las personas que se han conectado, que están en este momento por Zoom. Y bueno, pues Heather, ¿cómo estás? Good, good night, creo.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much, Brian and Fernando, for the invite. As Fernando said, my name is Heather Shorten. I am the executive director and founder of Pompeii Alliance. I was diagnosed July 10th, 2015, so just a little over 10 years ago. I started treatment 4 months later in November. So I've been on treatment since 2015. I do have my background is in social work. I have a master's degree in social work. Before I started Pompey Alliance, I worked with children in foster care in Washington, D.C. and in Maryland, the surrounding areas outside of Washington, D.C. I also have experience working with victims and perpetrators of domestic violence. And as I started to get sicker, my body just couldn't keep up with the demand of the job. And as a result of that, but also we moved, I had to leave that position, which was very hard because I really love the work that I did. And we moved overseas. And when we came back in 2018, I started Pompey Alliance. I figured I would take the experience that I had as a social worker and use that for the community that I was now a part of.
De Fernando, que ya están llegando los saludos para Heather en redes sociales. Nos saluda el brasileño, no sé si lo conoces, pero nos están hablando. Dice, gracias por brindar esta entrevista, Heather. Hay mucha gente que quiere conocerte, saben de tus capacidades y de todo lo que has logrado. Desde
Okay.
Brasil. Mira,
That makes me feel so happy. Thank you.
excelente. Heather, yo tengo una pregunta. ¿Cómo fue esa primera vez que te diagnosticaron con enfermedad de Pompe? ¿Cómo lo recibiste?
Um, so oddly enough, I was in the hospital for another reason. I the week before, I think, had my appendix out, and I was back in the hospital because I was having some complications when the doctor called to say you have Pompe disease. And I went through this gamut of emotions. I was scared, I was sad, I was anxious, but I was also relieved and happy because, first of all, he said to me, you have Pompe disease, and the good news is there's treatment for this. But then second, I knew something was wrong with me. And I saw a couple of doctors that were like, oh, you'll just have to have physical therapy for the rest of your life. Women don't get muscular dystrophy. So I was really brushed off. So this validated what I already knew. Also, the social worker in me, the whole time as I'm going through this process of diagnosis, is like, okay, what's the plan? What's the plan? What do I need to do? What are the steps? And so now I had an answer. And so I could start formulating a plan.
Ok. ¿Y tu primera infusión? ¿Cuándo fue?
So for my first infusion, I went to see my doctor. And at this time, as I said before, we were moving. My husband had gotten a new job and we were moving. So when I went to see my neurologist, no, I'm sorry. I went to see my geneticist first. And we talked about treatment, and she said she listed all of this stuff, these tests that I needed to have before I could start treatment. And I just broke down into tears and I said, you don't understand. I need to start this as soon as possible because I have children. They're young and I need to be here for them. And so she kind of fast tracked it. But while I was waiting, I was having a lot of anxiety because I was reading about what ERT is, but I didn't know what it looked like. And so I was frantically searching the internet to try to find pictures, a video, anything. Not just words. I needed to see it. And lo and behold, I came across this video of a woman in New Zealand by the name of Alison Locke. And at the time, she was traveling from New Zealand every other week to either Sydney or Brisbane, Australia, because she was part of a clinical trial. And the news did a story on her. And in that story was a video of her receiving treatment. And so I felt relieved at that point because I finally saw what it looked like. And I had the chance to meet Alison. I started treatment in fall of 2015. I met Alison in the spring of 2016. And it was like meeting a celebrity. And to this day, Alison and I remain good friends. My family has visited her in New Zealand. I refer to her as my Mick Jagger or Michael Jackson. Like, she's a big celebrity to me. And I've shared that story with her and how her story really helped me. And I don't know if that was her point in allowing them to come talk to her, but it certainly provided me with the relief that I needed to be able to go in to do treatment because I knew what to expect.
Importantísimo entonces esas redes de apoyo, esos grupos, conocer personas que tienen su mismo diagnóstico, es importantísimo en estos casos. Te quería preguntar cómo está el tratamiento de Pompe hoy en día en Estados Unidos, porque pues sabemos que Heather vive en Ohio, Estados Unidos. ¿Cómo está hoy en día el tema de los tratamientos, de estos ensayos clínicos? ¿Cómo se encuentra hoy eso, Heather?
So currently in the US, we have 3 FDA approved treatments: Lumazyme, Nexviazyme, and Pombiliti Opfolda. Lumazyme and Nexviazyme are Sanofi, Pombiliti is Amicus.
Excelente.
There are multiple clinical trials going on for different types of gene therapies. I think Arrow Therapeutics, that's ARO. They have one that's occurring, or they're planning to start in the US soon. Astellas has one that I think the first part of it wrapped up recently, and then they'll be recruiting soon for the next part. Amicus has a clinical trial that they have begun recently to recruit for IOPD, or children with LOPD. Who else?
Wow.
Think Ask Bio has one that's gonna be there are several companies here that are working on them. We actually, Pompe Alliance worked with Rare X and Pompe Warrior Foundation, and over the summer we held a 3-part webinar series where we kind of covered this issue. And you can see them on our YouTube channel.
Una pregunta.
Mariela también, si desea preguntar, con mucho gusto
Adelante.
nos dices, Mariela, si deseas preguntarle algo a Heather.
Claro, sí, por supuesto. O sea, me imagino que tiene muchísimo conocimiento em, y, bueno, como desde su experiencia como trabajadora social y también como paciente con Pompe, em, quería preguntarle también cuál ha sido como los desafíos más grandes en cuanto a salud mental que ha visto en su comunidad.
That showed up totally in Spanish on my end.
Okay, sorry. I'll make the
No
question in
worries.
English. I was saying that what would be interesting to know, which are the biggest challenges in mental health inside your Pompe community in the USA.
Sure. So, Pompeii Alliance conducted mental health research. We started about 2 or 3 years ago conducting mental health research. And we started with a survey, and we surveyed patients and caregivers, patients 18 and over, and caregivers. We found that so the biggest challenge is finding a provider that understands the needs of a person with Pompe or a caregiver of a person with Pompe. We found that we also found a big challenge. Well, we also found that doctors just often aren't even recommending it at the time of diagnosis, which is a challenge. Patients and caregivers want to receive mental health services, but doctors aren't recommending it. And then there's also the time aspect. Patients and caregivers are saying, look, I've got 5 specialists that I see, I've got treatment. Some people, especially children, might be receiving this treatment once a week. And so the challenge is, where do I fit one more specialist into the list of people I already see? But the biggest challenge, I think, is finding a provider that understands your journey as a patient or a caregiver, and being not only understanding it, but being sympathetic to it.
Es importantísimo, ¿no? El tema de salud mental. Pues eso también lo hemos visto con Rarus, con todas las investigaciones que se han creado. Heather, ahí nos estás entendiendo ¿tienes los closed caption?
Yes.
Heather, Heather,
Yeah,
¿estás entendiendo?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Ok. Bueno, te estábamos diciendo que el tema de salud mental es importantísimo. Pues ya que te lo había preguntado Mariela, la pregunta que quería hacerte era, bueno, ya nos comentaste en este momento el tema de los resultados. Estos resultados se dieron también en abril en la conferencia de Pompe para adultos en Duke University, y ahí se mostraron pues estos resultados de esa encuesta de salud mental de pacientes y cuidadores. Esos resultados, a grosso modo, Heather, ¿cómo los ves? ¿Los ves bien? ¿Los ves mal? ¿Van en caída? ¿Van en subida? ¿Cómo ves la salud mental ahorita de los pacientes, sobre todo?
Um, no, the results were surprised. Well, I don't even want to say they were surprising. We the my colleagues that I'm working with, um, we already kind of suspected that it was an unmet need. Wanted to be able to verify it through the survey and the research. But we also wanted to get more information about whether or not the community was whether or not the community was interested in us pursuing this further, and what was the best use of the information that we were receiving from the survey as well as the interviews. As far as how we're doing in the U.S. with mental health, we have a long way to go. We've my colleagues and I've done a couple of presentations at Duke. We had a poster presentation at the World Symposium in San Diego back in February. We actually did a presentation just last weekend for the Pediatric Duke Conference. And I'm going to the Pompey family meetup in October to do a presentation for them as well. But we still have a long way to go. I think we're because of the work we're doing, we are gaining some traction. I think as we've talked to industry partners, they're seeing the value in it, but they're also asking, how can mental health how can we support patients' mental health? They participate in clinical trials. And so there's a lot of different aspects of this research and of this mental health work that we weren't even thinking about when we started the research. But as we're having conversations with different parties, whether it's other people doing research or industry or other nonprofit organizations, we're really finding other potential uses. But just in general, mental health in the United States, it's still seen as a stigma. People don't want to talk about it. And so we really do have a long way to go, not just in the Pompeii community, but for mental health services in general.
Gracias.
¿Y y por qué se ve como un estigma? ¿A qué se debe eso? De que la salud mental se vea como un estigma. ¿Por qué?
There's a long history of it, like going back to when we still had these massive institutions where people were institutionalized and mistreated and given forced lobotomies. It really goes back to that. And then in the 80s, when a lot of those places were shut down and people had nowhere to go. And so, they end up being homeless, or, they go home and they're not treated well there. But, TV and movies don't help much either when you see people, in the movies, and the murderer is the person that has schizophrenia, when in reality, people who have mental health
Uy, sí.
diagnoses are more likely to be victims of crime versus perpetrating the crime. So and then there's cultural stigmas around it. So like in the Black community, and I know in my own family, even though myself and my sister are mental health
Sí.
professionals, we have people in our family that say, nope, that conversation doesn't happen outside the family. Or they don't think what therapists do is real work. So there's a lot of there's stigmas within different cultures as well about and we heard that in our research. People saying, no, I don't go to a therapist because my husband doesn't believe in therapy, or my father doesn't believe in therapy. So we heard that in our research as well.
Eder, ¿y cómo podemos hacer para cambiar eso desde la fundación o nosotros como personas? ¿Cómo podemos comenzar a cambiar eso? ¿Qué recomendación nos das?
Just what we're doing now. We have to have these conversations. When I was going through my diagnostic journey, I was seeing a therapist, and I don't know what I would have done without her. And I started seeing her for something totally unrelated. And she didn't have any particular training in chronic illnesses, but she just happened to be a person that was very sympathetic to what I was going through. She was able to help me with some coping skills, and I really needed that at the time. After my second child was born, I had severe postpartum depression. I was suicidal. I had to stay in the hospital a few times because of that. I was in an outpatient partial hospitalization program, and I'm sitting here today because of those services. And during COVID, I went back to seeing a therapist because as a person with an illness that affects my respiratory system, COVID was terrifying to me. I didn't want to leave my house.
Sí.
And so I went back to seeing a therapist because I needed someone to help me through that. And again, she wasn't a person that was trained in Pompeii. She was a person that was trained in the in anxiety and those types of issues. And so she was able to help me work through that severe anxiety I was feeling at times during COVID. And so I think that's how we break the stigma is being able to have these conversations and saying, to me, talking about my mental health and my mental health journey is no different than talking about Pompeii and my Pompeii journey.
Ok. Enano,
Brian, ¿sí sabías que acá en Latinoamérica pues estamos más o menos parecidos a lo que está diciendo Ger en Estados Unidos? Pero
sí.
pues en Argentina es uno de los países donde hay mayor número de psicólogos y donde las personas más van a terapias desde muy pequeños y eso realmente es cultural, o sea, eso viene siendo cultural. En Latinoamérica nos hace mucha falta eso y pues creo que después del COVID realmente se dieron cuenta que la salud mental es importante para una persona. Y más, por ejemplo, en este tipo de enfermedades huérfanas, como lo es Pompe, ¿no? Recibir un diagnóstico de una enfermedad huérfana, pues es difícil y siento que también el apoyo de la familia y el apoyo de los grupos o de las redes sociales o de las fundaciones o organizaciones de pacientes es súper importante. No sé si de pronto el doctor José que está por acá tiene alguna pregunta o nos la puede enviar por escrito o la puede decir, puede colocar su micrófono o si alguien tiene alguna pregunta para hacerle a Heather, aprovechar estos espacios que nos brindan
Hola, Víctor. Víctor, para hacer la pregunta tienes que activar los subtítulos traducidos.
o que nos la haga y Mariela nos ayuda, por
Ok,
favor.
Bueno,
adelante, Víctor.
buenas noches,
Corto y conciso.
buenos días para todos. Javier, ¿cuánto hace que pudiste descubrir lo de Pompe en Estados Unidos?
Eh,
La
María.
pregunta es, ¿hace cuánto pudiste descubrir la enfermedad de Pompe?
About how long ago did I hear about Pompeii?
Sí, ¿hace cuánto tiempo tienes Pompe?
Te
¿Cuándo te
diagnosticaron.
diagnosticaron?
So the first time I heard about it was 10, 11 years ago. I was doing some as I was getting sicker, I was doing research and I came across Pompeii in some research that I was doing, but what I found only mentioned IOPD. So I dismissed it. I didn't read any further because at that time I was 40. And what I read that said it was something that was something children got and that they didn't live very long after diagnosis.
Em,
Ok,
Traduciendo, chicos, hace más o
gracias.
menos
Los 10 años.
10 11 años está diagnosticada, Víctor.
Ok, gracias.
¿Alguien más tiene una pregunta?
Estamos
Eder,
en este momento por Facebook. No sé si hay alguna pregunta por Facebook, por YouTube, que de pronto nos quieran hacer. Aprovechemos esta oportunidad de que estamos abriendo a Estados Unidos. Pues obviamente la investigación en Estados Unidos es un poco diferente a Latinoamérica. Por ahí me
Porfa.
preguntaron cuál es la enzima que te aplicas, Heather, o con cuál empezaste y con cuál vas ahora. La enzima, si es Myosin, si
¿Y
es...
por qué? ¿Y por qué entre todas escoges esa?
Um, so I started on Lumazyme when I was initially diagnosed, but I've also been on Myozine because I've received treatment outside of the US. I when I lived in Australia for 2 years, and there I received Myozine. Um, I lived in Singapore, but in Singapore it was Lumazyme. And when I came back to the US in April of 2023, I switched over to Nexviazyme. And I'm currently on a double dose of Nexviazyme. I get it every other week, but I'm on a double dose.
Wow,
¡Wow! Dosis doble. ¿Qué tal?
wow,
Yeah,
wow, superpoderes.
I started having some new cardiac symptoms probably in like the late summer of or fall of 2023. And then so we and it was, I don't think Pombility had been approved here yet. So we talked about doing the double dose, my doctor and I. And then once Pombility was approved, I just stayed on Nexviazyme because the double dose was working.
¡Wow, wow! ¿Y
But
Acá
cuál?
but
todavía estamos
insurance,
con Myosin, ¿no? Todavía en Colombia y en varios países de Latinoamérica todavía estamos con Myosin. Solo Brasil y Argentina
De
están
Argentina.
con Lumizyme. Con Lumizyme.
Nesviazyme.
Sí,
Exviazyme.
Nexviazyme, perdón.
and
Hay una
insurance
pregunta.
companies here don't want to
Hay
insurance
preguntas.
companies here don't want to cover it because it's off label. There are some patients who are on a double dose, but it sometimes is a fight with insurance
Ajá,
companies.
así es. Eder, hay una pregunta en Zoom que dice, disculpen, no tenía red para conectarme. No sé si ya lo compartió, pero me gustaría saber cuáles fueron sus síntomas iniciales y cuál de ellos fue lo que le hizo determinar al médico tratante diagnosticar la enfermedad de Pompe previo a hacerle la prueba de sangre.
So, my what initially took me to see the doctor was I had like water on the knee, so my knee was really swollen. It hurt really bad. I couldn't bend it. And I went in and the doctor drained it. But at the time, he told me I also had muscle wasting in my lower legs, but he didn't know why. And he said, you'll just have to have physical therapy for the rest of your life. And that didn't make sense to me because I was already an active person. So, and I was in my 30s. So there was no reason for me to be losing muscle. But within a couple of months of that, I started having a lot of muscle pain. I had joint pain. My joints were like, felt like they were burning. I had a lot of back pain. I had shoulder pain, numbness, and tingling in my fingers. When I would drive, I couldn't grip my fingers around my hands around the steering wheel because I had a lot of pain and tingling in my fingertips. Um, I was sleeping on like 5 pillows every night because if I laid flat, I couldn't breathe. I woke up in the morning, I was in pain. I went to bed in pain. Um, and I knew something was wrong because I felt like no, a person can't live like this. You can't be in pain like this and be okay. Um, I went for a second opinion, and the doctor there said the same thing as my original doctor. I would need physical therapy. And that appointment, I asked him about muscular dystrophy because my brother had, we found out later, had been misdiagnosed with some form of muscular dystrophy. He told me, the doctor, that women didn't get muscular dystrophy. And I knew that wasn't true. I was very angry. I had gone to the muscular dystrophy website. There were women on that website. So I knew that wasn't true. But I left the appointment. I immediately called my brother-in-law, who is a medical professional, and told him what happened. He suggested that I call the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I did, and they very quickly connected me with a doctor at Johns Hopkins. We lived near Baltimore and Maryland at the time. And this doctor, he was just incredible. He ran lots of tests. He did genetic testing and just a whole lot of different things. And he couldn't figure out what was going on. And after reviewing my brother's records alongside mine, he was really confused. And so he said, I don't know what you have, but I have a colleague at NIH, the National Institute of Health, and I'm going to refer you to him. And so we went to see him. My brother and I sat with the doctor. The first thing he said to us when he walked into the room is, I think you have something called Pompe disease. And he got that just from reviewing our medical records. So it was, for me, it was a short journey. It was about 2 years, but my brother had been misdiagnosed and was sent home and told, by the time he was 40, he'd be in a wheelchair. And so they didn't give him any hope. They didn't, they totally dismissed his concerns. And he so for him, he now had a treatment. Before, whatever it was they had diagnosed it with him with, there was no treatment for. But we were very fortunate to get connected to this doctor. And I always say that, like, I'm sitting here today because of the knowledge that this doctor had. That just looking at some records, he was able to say we had Pompeii.
Eso es importante, que los médicos y que el personal de salud se capaciten y conozcan este tipo de enfermedades para que así mismo las puedan diagnosticar.
Así es.
Importantísimo esto y pues creo que también pasó con Brian.
Sí,
El pompe le salvó la vida. Hay varios pacientes que terminan teniendo, los pasan de un especialista a otro especialista y pasan años y todavía no conocen su diagnóstico, lo que los aqueja. Entonces es importante que pues a las personas de salud que nos están viendo, que conozcan lo que es estas enfermedades huérfanas, lo que es POMPE, cómo diagnosticarlo, que le crean al paciente, que puedan ir un poco más allá y escucharnos. Escuchar al paciente es importantísimo. Quiero, no sé si estaba por acá, porque yo lo vi hace poquito a Eric
Eric,
Gómez que te quiere saludar. Tú también lo conoces, por ahí está, acá lo tenemos en pantalla.
Hi, Heather. How are you? Happy Thursday. Hi,
Happy
everyone.
Thursday. How are
I'm
you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being coming to this interview. I know they told me they're gonna have Heather for Pompe interviews, and nice to hear all these stories and learn more about you and how I know you mentioned they were living in Baltimore before, so I live close to Baltimore, and also I've been able to help other clients to refer. I work in a nonprofit too. I was
Right.
able to refer clients to John Hopkins because I think it's one of the hospitals that can help them. But great to see you and
You
learn more
too.
about Pompe because we have so many different diagnosis. Sometimes we don't know the right, and also learning about how you went through the pandemic. And it went through many clients that I also serve. They went through all this, especially when you have a diagnosis, you're afraid. but thank you for sharing. And also, I think mental health is very important for everyone. Um, you know, mental health is one of the recommendations I always recommend for everyone, even if you have like good, news or bad news that or things that go into your life. Vaya, gracias chicos por estar acá. La verdad que contento de estar acá conociendo más sobre lo que está compartiendo Heather. La conocimos en un evento en North Carolina y qué bien que viene a contarnos esta parte de su historia, de lo que ha pasado y cómo también la salud mental es muy importante. Gracias, quería saludar. Yo sé que estoy acá en el trabajo. I'm at work, I'm still at work, but I just want to say hi and thank you
It's good to
from
see
this
you.
part. Good to see you too.
Bueno, y también queremos saludar a Ruth, que se encuentra acá por medio también de FECOER, que nos están acompañando y también hace parte de todas estas organizaciones de pacientes que visibilizamos el tema de enfermedades huérfanas. Ruth Gallego, que está acá con nosotros, bienvenida y muchas gracias por estar acá en este espacio. Si tienes de pronto alguna pregunta para nuestra invitada o si nos escribes por el Zoom, como quieras, Ruth. Y pues muchas gracias también a FECODE por siempre estar atentos a todo lo que en este momento hacemos en redes sociales, prestos a colaborarnos en todas las charlas.
Ah,
Ruth,
sí.
¿estás por ahí? No, creo que está con el micro apagado. Bueno, Brian, ¿cómo vamos en redes? ¿Cómo estamos? ¿Hay alguna pregunta que de pronto haya por ahí? No sé si Mariela. Ruth dice que no tiene preguntas. Mariela, si tiene alguna pregunta también.
Yes, I was about to raise my hand and make a question because everything you've shared, Heather, is so interesting and you're being so generous with your experience with all of us. And we're really learning from that you've been telling us. And my question is that since you had this experience of traveling abroad and having the responsibility of taking care of your health in different countries, how have you seen like your accessibility to treatments outside the US or even inside the US? How have you managed getting them, your finances in Singapore and Australia that you mentioned that you traveled to?
Um, so as far as insurance goes for my family, we're very fortunate. My husband works for the government, and so we have better insurance than most people in the US. It's affordable. It affords like our deductibles and what we have to pay out of pocket are a lot less than what other people might have to pay. But when we moved overseas, it's a little bit more complicated because we have to, so when we went to Australia, um, um, our insurance provider doesn't do what they call a direct billing agreement with providers outside of the United States. So when we went to Australia, we had to work something out with the doctor, the hospital, and Sanofi, so that I could still get the care that I needed outside of the US, but we weren't paying out of pocket for it. What we ended up paying out of pocket for was the use of the hospital, which was like 1,000 Australian dollars per treatment. So about 2,000 Australian dollars a month. And so when we are overseas, we have a card that we use just for medical costs. So we pay that, then we submit it to our insurance provider. Our insurance provider reimburses us, and we use that money to pay the card, which is what a lot of people do when Americans, when they live outside of the US. Unless you're in the military, that's a different story. Those people, they can go wherever when they're outside of the US. When we went to Australia, I'm sorry, Singapore, however, the doctor there wanted a direct billing agreement. He wanted to be able to bill our insurance provider directly. And we went to our insurance provider and we said, the doctor wants to do this. How do we make it happen? And the insurance provider said, we don't do that. And so my husband and I were like, that doesn't mean you can't do it. So we were really looking at lots of different options to make this happen. And at the end of the day, after much pushing, and it took more than a year, the insurance decided they were going to draft a contract that they submitted to the doctor, and the doctor, they now had a direct billing agreement with him. That was the first time this insurance provider had ever done that. And since while we were there, for all of my treatment for the drug, the use of the hospital, he billed the insurance directly. So we never saw a bill for it. Other things like when I would go see my neurologist, not my neurologist, because he was the one that was doing the treatment, my cardiologist, for example, I paid out of pocket to see him, and then we got reimbursed by our insurance. But the difference that I found in being in overseas versus being in the US, when I would call my doctor to say I need to come in for an appointment, they would say to me on the phone, okay, your visit is going to be $100. Or when you went in to the office to see her, it was like a menu, like on the counter, where it said these are the things that the doctor might do. An exam costs this, EKG costs this, and it had prices. You never see that in the US. Never. So when I go to the doctor, I get billed to my insurance, and my insurance pays a portion of it, but I have a copay, which is like $20. So it's not much. But you in most cases you don't know in advance what you're being billed. Now I don't know if it's a United States wide law or if it's Ohio, but the Cleveland Clinic, which is where I receive my care, they have a thing that's like no surprise bills or something. And so they say that if you are told it's going to cost you $500, then you're not going to see a surprise bill for now $1,000. I don't know if that's a law throughout the United States or if that's just an Ohio law.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's so interesting to know how it works when you travel. And also it's inspiring that you managed to get the refund on all that you have paid in taking care of your treatment. And since you have also known the experience of your community Pompe Alliance members, how would you say is the situation for the rest of your community? Are they getting the treatment funded by security?
So here you have your insurance, whether it's insurance through your employer or it's Medicare or Medicaid, which is funded through the state or the federal government, and that would cover your cost for treatment. Sanofi in this country does have a copay assistance program. So like at the start of the year, my out of pocket might be $5,000 or $7,500 US that I have to pay out of pocket over the course of the year. But once I meet that, then after that, for the rest of the year, I don't have any cost. Sanofi's copay assistance program will pay that for patients on Lumazyme or Nexviazyme in the United States. I assume Amicus has a similar copay assistance program, but their case management program is a little bit newer because their product was approved in the fall of 2023. So and then here as well, if you're on the Sanofi drug or the Amicus drug, you have case management, and so your case manager will help you navigate some of those insurance issues. Sanofi has they have a program, and I'm sorry, the name of it is escaping me right now, but it's designed to help patients. So for example, if you're in between jobs, it's like a bridge. So Sanofi maybe for 6 months would cover the cost of your infusion until you get a new job and you start on new insurance. So they do have various services and programs in place to help patients who do need some additional assistance.
Thank you. That's great to hear. And I
Aquí
ask
hay una
because,
pregunta, Mariela,
sí,
en,
seguro.
en, en el Zoom, si de pronto Gabriela nos puede ayudar para preguntarla,
Oh,
porfis.
can I add one more thing? And so we also in the US have Assessia Health, the Assistance Fund, and there's a third one, but I can't remember. But Assessia and the Assistance Fund, they provide patients with um, um, it's almost like an allowance, if you will. Like so they might give a patient $6,000 at the start of the year. And that money is designed to help with other costs, not the cost of your treatment, but maybe if you need to go see the dentist or you need glasses, it's designed to help with those medical costs. The assistance fund is very similar, but theirs might be a reimbursement type of program. And both of them will also help with transportation to and from appointments or to and from your treatment. So you have there are those types of programs as well.
Amazing. Great to know. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Ahora sí, Gabriela,
Gabriela.
¿estás por ahí?
Sí, aquí estoy. La digo así como está escrita, ¿cierto?
Sí,
Sí.
Acá preguntan, Heather, más que una pregunta, sí me gustaría un mensaje o consejo para todas las personas que están en este navegar bajo su experiencia, ¿qué es lo que más la ha fortalecido?
That's a That's an interesting question. I definitely think my support network has helped me to be strong. I remember when I was on this journey, uh I have a friend who I've known since the ninth grade, and she lived near me, and she would go with me to my appointments when my husband couldn't. And she would hold my hand, and I remember that test they did where they stick the needle into your muscles, the EMG. But she didn't like needles, and she would do like this, but she would hold my hand nonetheless. So definitely my support system has helped to make me stronger. um Having being able to advocate for myself, and I'm not a science person, so when I read some of the information about Pompeii, I have to ask a lot of questions because some of the words I don't understand and I have to look them up. But having the knowledge has certainly helped to make me stronger because it's made me a better advocate for myself. but also connecting with the Pompeii community. I remember the first Duke conference that I went to in 2016, and it was a very powerful feeling to walk into this room and everybody sitting in there could understand what I was going through, either because they had Pompeii themselves or they were the spouse or the caregiver or some, had some connection to people sitting in the room that had Pompeii. So those connections have definitely helped as well.
¿Algo más, Gabriela? Bueno,
No, no hay más preguntas.
entonces, no sé si alguien más tiene por decir para ver si vamos cerrando, que ya van a ser las 7 Colombia, 8 Ohio.
Sí, acá solo just to close what I was saying, thank you for sharing everything that you mentioned about insurance and funds and patient support programs, because right now in Latin America, it feels like we are light years ahead, I mean, behind the US and the programs that you have available. But it's inspiring to know that they exist, that you've been able to advocate for yourselves in communities to ask for this kind of support. And it gives us ideas on what to ask here too. So I'm sure that with the Pompe Club International Foundation and also businesses in health tech like Rarus Health, we can keep on pushing to get this kind of assistance here too. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Muchas gracias de
I
verdad, Mariana.
always say, part of what I think helped me to be able to be overseas and be with my family, because if I wasn't able to go, then we would have been separated. You just don't take no for an answer. You just keep asking. And if somebody said no to me, I went on to the next person. You'll get
Amazing.
to somebody that says yes at some point.
Yes, definitely you're setting a great example for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Y hay
Australia was
una
my number
frase.
one bucket list item. I'd always wanted to go to the Great Barrier Reef. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a fish. So I was not letting my husband go there without me.
Y yo quiero cerrar con una frase que posteó alguna vez Heather en su LinkedIn, que me llamó mucho la atención, que dice que es de Muhammad Ali, que dice, no cuentes los días, haz que los días cuenten. Me pareció una frase que hace como que todo lo que está trabajando en este momento Heather, y de verdad, pues sé que significa mucho esa frase para ti, Heather. Y bueno, darte las
Um,
gracias. Ah, sí.
Since I was diagnosed with Pompeii, I really have changed the focus of what's important to me in my life. I loved my job and I was working really hard at my job. But that was taking me away from family time, and I'm a quilter and I wasn't quilting. And so the days were, I was just going through the days. And once I got diagnosed, I totally reframed my thinking, and decided what was going to be important to me and what I was going to make time for. And so now I do feel I know it's not easy to make it count every day. And, that's nobody can make it count every day. But I do try to make sure that I am making most of my days count. I want to be able to look
Excelente.
back and say that I did.
Muchas gracias, Heather. Muchas gracias por aceptar esta invitación. a Mariela, que nos ha salvado la vida hoy.
No,
Y que
muchas gracias
además
a
de eso,
ustedes.
pues nos conocen también un poco más. Ya Mariela se ha vuelto de la familia, que a
Sí,
cada
me
rato se la
encanta.
pasa acá.
Sí, yo feliz también de acompañarlos, de ayudarlos también en lo que pueda, y sobre todo también es un privilegio poder aprender junto a ustedes en este tipo de actividades que también ustedes siempre son tan generosos de hacer para toda la comunidad. Así que muchísimas gracias.
Brian,
Oh, encantado y dispuesto a recibir a Heather en Cartagena. Te queremos en Colombia, Heather. Te queremos, Heather. Oh,
No,
Bienvenida,
I would
bienvenida.
love to come. I would love to come.
sí, 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 ojalá y puedas algún día venir a visitar nuestro hermoso país, y luego Latinoamérica también, Chile, otros países y puedas compartir con esta comunidad que siempre te abre los brazos, siempre te extiende los brazos para que estés con nosotros. Y de verdad, muchas
My
gracias a las
sister,
personas que se quedaron. Dime.
my sister is trying to plan a trip to Chile. There's a city there that she wants to visit, and I can't remember, but she also wants to do this drive. So, so maybe we're looking at possibly doing that. So,
Of course. Well, I'll talk to you later. We can keep communicating and
okay, that would
maybe,
be wonderful.
yeah, of course. Great to know you. Thank you, Heather.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Gracias,
Thank you
gracias a
for having
todos.
me. Thank you
Ay,
for having me.
no te me vayas, Ger, no se me vayan porque para tomarnos una foto.
y hay un mensaje,
¿Y hay un mensaje? Ah, sí, hay un
sí,
mensaje de Ruth.
de Ruth. Gabriela, ¿estás?
Eh,
Porfa, ¿no lo lees?
Sí, claro. El mensaje de Ruth dice, muy lindo, son muy valientes todos. Estas historias impulsan a continuar y no rendirse. Cada día es una oportunidad para vivir con amor, fuerza y resiliencia. Admiración total.
Y desde Facebook, Sandra Marín nos dice, Oli, hola, hello,
Sandra está de cumpleaños, happy birthday to you. Feliz
happy
cumpleaños a
birthday.
Sandrita, que es
Oh,
Hey,
happy birthday.
happy birthday, sí, creo que está en Barranquilla, está por
cerca.
allá en la playa, playa, brisa y mar, qué delicia, qué envidia. Ella también nos ha colaborado muchísimo, conoce mucho sobre el tema de cuidadores, del cuidado, y pues también unas grandes felicitaciones a ella y un abrazo a la distancia. Y pues gracias a todos los que participaron. Mañana tenemos otra charla súper interesante, esa sí es en español, para que no se me asusten. Es de derecho de los pacientes con enfermedades huérfanas, no sé por qué Nico ya hizo así. No, no, no es en inglés, Nico, es en español. Y bueno, acá los esperamos mañana a la misma hora por el mismo canal y
Y
no se me vayan.
los que están en inglés también la pueden ver.
Ah, bueno, también, aunque habla solo de Colombia, pero bueno,
Exactamente. Pero la idea es aprovechar la tecnología. Tenemos que aprender a manejar los subtítulos traducidos para expandirnos
Exactamente.
más. Sí.
eso dice Nico.
Bueno,
Vamos a cerrar
entonces
transmisión. Muchas
vamos
gracias a todos
La
y
muchas
no se
foto,
me
gracias a
vayan a ir,
todos.
no se me vayan a ir.
No se vayan a ir. Un momentico nos.
If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, and walk across the water, the water. If you're defeated, falling on your knees and looking out for some hope tonight. You try to stand up, but you throw your hands up like you no longer have the strength to fight. Cause you've seen too many sunsets, too many days ending in the darkest night. But on your own, you'll never know, you'll never know. If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water, the water. Believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water. If you believe. They say that all you but it's almost like you lost your way. Took a few wrong turns, took a few breaks, falling behind now, looking for grace. Cause you need someone to lift you up, yeah, make right all the things you've done. Cause on your own